Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday morning to you all. I hope you folks are doing well out there this morning and having a great start to your Tuesday and a fantastic week out there so far. Here to bring you the latest on what's going to happen weather-wise for your day. Of course, the big topic is severe weather, significant severe weather. In fact, I do think we're going to have an outbreak of severe storms. We have ongoing very active weather right now, multiple tornado warnings, multiple flash flood warnings, and severe thunderstorm warnings with this complex of energy and storms moving across areas in Nebraska and Iowa right now. More action expected to develop later on this morning to the afternoon, evening hours, and we're going to break this down in great detail for you folks. I think there's the potential for not only a severe weather outbreak, but also a tornado outbreak across areas of the Midwest. So we're going to break it down in great detail, take advantage of all those timestamps I got for you folks. There'll be state-by-state breakdowns. There also just will be kind of area-by-area timestamp breakdowns, and just a whole lot of breakdowns for you folks and time-stamped out for you guys to take advantage of all the details that we're going to feed you guys in this morning's video. As you can tell, there's about 1 million tabs pulled up, so you know this is going to be a beefy video. But my priority is to try to be extremely detailed. And, I don't like to just show you a massive area and then show you really quick what the radar could look like. We like to really get zoomed into these individual areas, mention a couple town and city names, and try not to miss any states involved in any particular severe weather event. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll also talk about a couple other things, a little bit of severe weather expected for the interior Northeast, but definitely not as significant as what we're going to see further west. So if you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. If I mix up any directions, any town names, any cities, anything like that, just note I'm talking very fast. There's a lot of information coming to my head very quick. I don't edit these videos at all, so I'm going to do the best that I can with all the information that we have with this severe weather event for a very large area. So let's get rocking and rolling. A lot of shower and storm activity, as I mentioned, across Nebraska and Iowa. You see the purple areas. I know it's probably kind of hard to see on your screen. Not going to bother zooming in because we're not going to stay too long on this. But those are tornado warnings. The red boxed areas, those are severe thunderstorm warnings. And the yellow, orangish red box areas, those are flash flood warnings. So it's very active. And we were expecting this morning. We got a nasty line of storms rumbling through eastern Nebraska right now, about to head into western Iowa. So we got that. We got a little bit of energy associated with the actual surface low. We had a nasty hailstorm. I think it was in Yuma, Colorado, I believe. Hail covered the ground, did a lot of damage. Hope you guys are doing okay. But we have energy in southern Ontario. This energy will be responsible for the southern end of this, so bringing some strong to severe storms across the Adirondacks, Vermont, New Hampshire, even into Maine a little bit later this afternoon as the atmosphere warms up, gets primed for some strong to severe storms. But of course, this is the big storyline right in here. We'll have storms that develops further southwest into this region too. A little bit of energy moving into Washington State, but not a big storyline at all. Watches, warnings, and advisories. Some winter weather alerts across the Rockies. Severe thunderstorm watches right now, which eventually will expire by the time some of you folks watch this video. But this is right now as of around 7 a.m. Eastern time, 6 a.m. Central time that I'm making this video. Flood watches are up in the green. Dense fog advisories in the gray. Heat advisories. Very hot conditions will be developing today over the next several days across the southern and eastern U.S. compared to average. Okay, so, you look at this map, you say, hey, there's not a whole lot going on, but it's going to get lit up later this morning into this afternoon with watches, warnings, and all those things. Excessive rainfall outlook. Areas of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, you're already getting a good bit of rain right now. You'll get even more rain over the next 24 hours. If you live in the yellow area, that means there's at least a 15% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles at any given point. Okay? All right, so let's get really into the meat of this video. A broad look at the Storm Prediction Center outlook. They will do another update in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I will put that in the community tab, and I'll put a link under this video if any massive changes occurs to this. So there's already been a pretty significant change, and we talked about the possibility of that happening if you tuned into yesterday evening's video. There was a very small moderate risk, but a very large enhanced risk that we still have. The moderate risk has gotten about 3 times as large now. Okay, moderate risk from southwestern now, Wisconsin all the way, including all of northern Missouri, western and northwestern sections of Illinois, and about 70-75% of Iowa. Okay, slight risk now extends all the way into the heart of Texas, and it's all the way up here into lower Michigan, the UP of Michigan. Enhanced risk has been extended through Chicago, Milwaukee, and yeah, there's definitely been some changes. Don't ignore the marginal risk. Also, a shot at some gusty winds, small hail with these storms. I will talk a little bit about that when we get to the northeast timestamp, and I got you covered there, but we're really obviously about to really dive deep into this. So let's zoom into this, okay? Closer look at my friends here in the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest. Here's another look at it. Shows town, city names, higher populated regions. One thing that sticks out to me on this is Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay, now all in the enhanced risk, level 3 out of 5 in the orange. The moderate risk, that's a level 4 out of 5. The next risk category up is a high risk. It would show up in the pink. Not sure if we're going to get that today. I don't think we are, but we'll see. You know, I never want to say never, right? Slight risk, level 2 out of 5 in the yellow. So, you know, just west of Peoria, you have a moderate risk. This could get tweaked a little bit further to the east to include you guys, but just know you have a high-end risk of severe weather today, one sweeping line of storms. Madison, enhanced risk. Janesville, enhanced risk. Just west, a moderate risk. Rockford, enhanced risk. So if you live in the southwestern sections of Michigan, Wisconsin, you have a moderate risk. But look how this moderate risk has been extended north into southeastern Minnesota. Enhanced risk now including Rochester, good chunk of southern and southeastern sections of Minnesota. So, yeah, I mean, what is this driven off of? That's the big question, right? Well, I wouldn't say a massive increase relatively speaking, but much larger area and a big bump up from a 10 to a 15% chance of tornadoes from yesterday evening's video that I did. Okay, if you tuned in yesterday evening, we had a 10% chance of our smaller area. Now, in that red area here, this is the tornado outlook. That is a 15% chance of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. We're not going to talk about Iowa. We'll break down Iowa here in a second. So that includes southwestern Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, western and northwestern sections of Illinois. Okay? There's no town names I see in here, but obviously we know there's towns and communities in this red area, right? 15% risk of a tornado within 25 miles of your given location. Yellow area, that's a 10% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. All right, this includes Rockford, Madison, down here to Peoria. Yeah, okay. That's I know 10 don't sound high, but there's a risk. In the brown area, that's a 5% risk of a tornado. This includes Green Bay, Milwaukee, Chicago, highly populated regions, Minneapolis, St. Paul region. Okay? And then in the green, that's a 2% risk. And if you notice in the black outline region, covering all of the red area, good chunk of the yellow area on the northern mode of this, you have a shot at a strong tornado. So this means it's what we call a hatch risk in the black outline region with the black dashes going in between. That means you have a 10% chance of an EF2 or higher tornado in this situation on the tornado outlook. Strong tornadoes are possible to likely today, in my opinion. All right, you look at the wind outlook for this area. Look how this has been extended now. Chance of significant, severe winds now extended all the way to Milwaukee and Chicago. All right, but let's talk about the pink area. 45% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. All right, this includes areas just west of Rockford and Peoria and just southwest of Madison. Madison, Rockford, Peoria, okay, Springfield, Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Rochester. You guys have a 30% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. All right, and then in the yellow, a 15% risk of that. Okay, chance of severe weather, certainly up here in the UP of Michigan and lower Michigan. Just not as high, just because you're further north. Typically, you don't get crazy severe weather in the UP of Michigan because the lakes kind of stabilize the atmosphere a little bit, but there will be a shot today, no doubt about it. But once again, you look at the black outline region covering all of northern, northwestern, western sections of Illinois, all of southern Wisconsin, and extreme southeastern sections of Minnesota. There's a 10% chance of significant severe winds, which means there's a 10% chance of winds exceeding 75 miles per hour or higher within 25 miles at any given point. Okay? And the last thing you'll look at is the hail outlook. Hail threat will be the highest threat further west. But you get in the southeastern Minnesota, a very small section of southwestern Wisconsin. Don't let me get my directions mixed up, because I will, because I'm talking 100 miles an hour to prevent this video from being 2 hours long. And then extreme western sections of Illinois. And that red area you see here, okay, that means there is a there is a 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger if you get hail. Yellow area, 15% risk of that. And then if you look in this black outline region covering sections of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois, that's a 10% chance of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. Hail threat won't be as big in these states that I'm covering right here. Okay, so the next area you look at is definitely going to be the big area. I thought about just showing this first, but I just kind of want to work in a way I kind of want to work northeast to southwest. Okay, the Iowa, northern Missouri, you guys have a moderate risk, level 4 out of 5. Is there a chance this upgrades to a high risk? I would say there's always a chance, but I would say there's probably question marks on the storm mode with this. I think they'll keep it at a pretty large moderate risk. Waterloo, Dubuque, Davenport, Iowa City, Burlington, down to Hannibal, all right, Kirksville, Missouri, St. Joseph, Ames, I think I already said Des Moines, Mason City, level 4 out of 5 risk of severe weather per the Storm Prediction Center. The orange area, that's an enhanced risk. Okay, level 3 out of 5. This includes Spencer, Omaha, Lincoln, Kansas City, down to Columbia, Missouri. All right, slight risk in the yellow, level 2 out of 5. St. Louis, down to Lebanon, Springfield, Branson, West Plains, Joplin, Topeka, York, all the way up to Sioux City. Okay, so what is this driven off of? Tornado outbreak potential. That's what it's driven off of, and a number of other things. Okay, wind and hail. But this entire red area, guys, a 15% chance to see a tornado within 25 miles at any given point. Okay, Des Moines, Waterloo, Iowa City, Dubuque, Mason City, Ames, Burlington, Kirksville, 15% risk to see a tornado within 25 miles of wherever you're standing. Okay, somebody said, if you lived in Des Moines, said, hey man, there's going to be a 15% chance you see a tornado within 25 miles of where you're standing right there. To me, I'd be like, well, okay, well, that's pretty significant. I mean, 15 might not seem high out of 100, but it is. That's a significant risk, okay? In the yellow area, that's a 10% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. You notice things really escalate once it gets into Iowa, northern Missouri. So, places like, Hannibal, Columbia, St. Joseph, 10% risk of a tornado. And then the brown, all the way down here to southwestern Missouri, even linking, kind of oozing into Omaha and Lincoln as we are starting to get into the next several hours. I mean, we have tornado warnings in this area right now. So, I mean, there's already, I don't know if it's confirmed tornadoes, there's radar. I'm not sure what exactly is happening right now. I'm sure once I hop on my phone after I'm done with this video, I'll know then. But, I mean, you have the risk of tornadoes also. Don't ignore the 5% risk area. I could see this 10% risk getting extended deeper into Missouri. It's very, very possible. Okay? But yeah, risk of tornadoes is substantial today. And then you look at the wind outlook, folks, and I mean, there is the potential for widespread damaging winds. Pink area, 45% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And one thing I forgot to mention, the black outline region, guys, that's a 10% risk of strong tornadoes, EF2 or higher. So there's in this black outline region with all the black dashes going in between it, a risk of strong tornadoes. Let's go back to the wind outlook. Pink area, 45% chance of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. Red area, 30% chance of that. Yellow area, 15% chance of that. And then the black outline region, a 10% risk to see winds exceeding 75 miles per hour or higher. That's Category 1, low-end Category 1 hurricane force winds. Okay? Big deal. And then we look at the hail outlook. Will be the biggest probably in central to southwestern Iowa, northern and northwestern Missouri. 45% chance. Des Moines, I mean, you're in the crosshairs of the highest risk of everything, right? Okay, 45, 45, 15. Big severe weather day in Des Moines, potentially. Okay, 45% chance in the pink of seeing hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. All right, in the red, that's a 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. Yellow area, 15% risk. Black outline region, folks, all right, that is a 10% chance, even all the way down to the yellow area. Remember, it's not 10 plus 15. That 10% that I mentioned for significant severe weather, that's its own thing. You don't add it on to all the other percentages I'm spitting out here. It's its own thing. So there's a 10% chance of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. Okay? So I do want to show my folks down here in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma some love. Not going to stay long on this, but you guys just have this kind of scrawny slight risk, but it does go through some highly populated regions. Fayetteville, Tulsa, Dallas, Fort Worth area, all the way to the heart of Texas. Slight risk level 2 out of 5, right? What is this driven off of? Well, there is a little bit of a tornado threat in Fayetteville, Fort Smith, 5% risk of a tornado in extreme northwestern Arkansas, northeastern Oklahoma. This green area, a 2% risk of a tornado. Okay, does include Tulsa. And we kind of back out of this and we look at the wind outlook. Certainly a 15% risk in the yellow area, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, of seeing winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then you look at the hail outlook. Now, any storms that do form, folks, I want to tell you there's rocket fuel down here in Oklahoma and Texas. Any storms that do form will have the potential to produce baseball-sized hail, in my personal opinion. A lot of fuel in the atmosphere, but there is a higher chance you don't see a drop of rain in this area right in here. Okay, and we will show you what the radar could potentially look like per the OUTBREAK model later on this afternoon, this evening, and overnight hours in Oklahoma and Texas. Okay, so 10% risk of very large hail in this region. All right, let's break it down state by state. Let's start off in Nebraska. We're getting a lot of nasty weather right now. The OUTBREAK model, I think, is doing a heck of a job picking up on those storms ongoing right now in Nebraska. All this energy will head on off into areas of Iowa, Minnesota, and then South Dakota. Really, the next thing you watch and the last thing you watch is this one last push of energy associated with the surface low. This will originate out of southwestern Nebraska, and I want to note, and I'll try to mention this on every timestamp. If you're confused about the time frame, this is an Eastern time. So if you're in Central time, back it up an hour. So this is 9 a.m. here in the next couple hours in Nebraska. This will be the next area of storms to watch, and really the last one. So around 11 a.m. lunchtime, you got an area of storms kind of cruising through, really, I would say, the southern half of Nebraska. These will become more intense, especially around lunchtime afterwards, mainly for eastern, northeastern Nebraska. And these storms could kind of rumble through the same areas that they're rumbling through right now. And once they get into this area of Nebraska, they could produce a spin up, large hail, and damaging winds, especially right into here. No doubt about it, the risk of severe weather is the highest in extreme eastern Nebraska. But once these storms kind of head off into Iowa, around early to mid-afternoon, you're done. Stable air moves in, surface low pulls out, brings in that cold front, and then you could get sporadic showers, maybe some small hail with these. But as far as significant severe weather, it's a wrap. So you just got to watch for this complex of storms that develops in central Nebraska, sweeps through eastern Nebraska throughout the morning, early afternoon hours. So, be aware of that. Could be some damaging winds with these storms in eastern Nebraska. But we got a separate segment for Iowa. We're going to spend some time on Iowa here. Dealing with all the nasty weather right now, OUTBREAK model, picking it up on it pretty well. You folks know I typically use the OUTBREAK model. Once again, if you're confused about the timing that I'm talking about these storms, look over here. I know it's probably pretty small on your screen, especially if you're viewing on a phone. There's not really a good way to make this any bigger without spending an hour or two editing the videos. And unfortunately, we're working a full-time job, having a family. I just don't have time to do that until I do this full-time for a living. But enough of all that. Back this up 1 hour, 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's Central Time. So I cannot change this from Eastern Time to Central Time. So this is around 7 a.m. So, here in the next hour or so, right? Storms will continue to rumble through Iowa. These will still continue to pack a punch, mainly for northern Iowa. Okay, you see these storms kind of north of Des Moines, north of Ames, impacting the northern counties of Iowa. This will continue. It will get quite active as early as late morning in southeastern Minnesota as the surface low is kind of pulling in from the northwest. And you look at all these storms here, still very active. Now, I think the models are kind of coming together more on there not being as many clusters of storms as what it was looking like kind of yesterday when we talked about this kind of last night. But I do think there's going to be an opportunity for a couple rounds of severe storms throughout the morning and the afternoon hours, so around 1 p.m. in northern Iowa, before the main event moves in. So this is 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and I want you to note, this is a nasty looking storm right here, capable of producing very large hail, damaging winds, and a tornado threat. I just don't know if the thermodynamics is kind of that surface moisture that we talk about is up here in this region yet. I think it'll pull up into this region later in the afternoon to this evening, but this might be an elevated storm here. But these storms that basically erupt almost out of nowhere that you're about to see from 2 to 3 p.m., bang, these are not. These are probably surface bound, They're latching on. They're ingesting warm, moist air, very warm, moist air down here in southern Iowa compared to northern Iowa. Okay, surface low up here. These storms are going to be absolutely dangerous. I mean, capable of producing all hazards, very large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. Could be like a line of semi-discrete supercells. So this is around 4 p.m. I really hope, because I'm not honestly, I'm not going to be able to mention every town and city in Iowa, but I hope you know in general where you are on the map, and that's not a knock on anybody, but believe it or not, there is people out there that really can't pick to the general area where they are on a map in their state. So it's very important, especially on a severe weather day like today. But here it is. It's around 4 or 5 p.m. Look at this. You see how they're kind of individual, kind of sectioned out here? That tells me that this is going to be a line of semi-discrete supercells. Supercells is a rotating thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. This is rumbling right through Ames, all the way up to northern Iowa. Northern Iowa could get multiple rounds of storms. But the southern sections of Iowa, big tornado threat. All right, Des Moines getting hit at this point. This is getting into 5 p.m., 6 p.m. I want to note, look at northern Missouri. This is going to be highly impacting this area with the same kind of environment as in what's in southern Iowa. These storms will continue to make their way through, guys. It's around 6 p.m. This is 7 p.m. These are hitting the Iowa City region, Dubuque area, down to Burlington. And this is around 7 p.m. These storms capable of producing all hazards. I mean, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts, strong tornadoes. But by the time you get until right after the sun setting, this event's done for Iowa. Cool, dry air kind of moves in, and it might actually be a little chilly when you wake up tomorrow morning. But, like I said, these storms erupt right here, 3 p.m., just move across the state in about a 6 to 7 hour period, okay? Capable of producing all hazards. And you look at the updraft velocity swath, what you're seeing here is where this particular model run is trying to indicate rotation in these storms, stronger updrafts. Stronger updrafts mean larger hail, more damaging winds, and an opportunity for a tornado to form. So this is what happens between now and the next couple hours. Watch what happens as we move into the life of this event. Okay, let's just take it all the way through. This area up here is what happens between now and early this afternoon with some individual cells. Sometimes this is overdone. Okay, sometimes it'll show strong rotation with storms that are more elevated. But you can't ignore these storms later this morning into early this afternoon in northern Iowa. They will have the capability. But you see these slashes into this region. This is indicating rotation with these storms in southern Iowa, northern Missouri. And we'll talk more about Missouri. I know I'm kind of leaving you guys out. But I will talk more about Missouri in the Midwestern time frame. But this is where it's picking up on these on the rotation with these storms that'll sweep through that kind of line of semi-discrete supercells that'll sweep through southern Iowa that could produce all hazards. Okay, and you look at the significant tornado parameter with this today. Get all this stuff off your screen here. And remember, the higher the number, the better the ingredients for tornadoes. And you keep this rumbling here, and you take it through about midday. I want you to notice here, see how there's this weird cutoff and like nothing here, and then 7, 8s, 9s into here? That is our warm front boundary, kind of separating very unstable air with more stable air. So I think there's going to be some sort of warm front right in here. But if you notice, as the surface low kind of pulls in, the ingredients for tornadoes will climb into southeastern Minnesota, I would say, as we start to get later into the afternoon this evening. And you notice how it has an abrupt cutoff from right here to here. That is our cold front moving in. Triple point being met. Best lift for thunderstorms, best kinematics, best thermodynamics, overlapping in Iowa. That's why the highest chance for tornadoes a day is in the state of Iowa. And then this pulls through, significant tornado parameter drops off, and we're done with severe weather. But it really spikes there, right? We cannot ignore the damaging wind threat in Iowa. Okay, here it comes. Could get some strong gusty winds in these storms kind of between now and through all the way through about midday. Can't ignore those. And then here comes the sweeping line of storms down here. See how it gets lit up down here. I know it's weirdly kind of sectioned off. This is because it's in 1 hour periods, and these storms are going to be covering a lot of mileage ground in 1 hour periods, because when these storms are really close to the surface low or just off of it, very fast storm motion. So a tail whipping line of storms. And you see these little white areas here, even some like pink area here. That has winds approaching like 90 to 100 miles per hour in this line of storms. Damaging winds please don't overlook this risk. If you don't get a tornado warning, chances are, if you're in a line of storms, you're getting some very strong winds. And then the winds will be very strong behind this too. So it'll get some very gusty winds overnight after the cold front moves in, especially in northwestern Iowa. So special segment there for Iowa, because I'm very concerned about you guys. But of course, like Ryan Hall, I believe, says, don't be scared, be prepared, or the other way around. I agree with it. 100% agree with it. But let's take a look at the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region. So I'm not going to break down each and every state like I did Iowa. This video would go on for 2.5, 3 hours if I did that. But we're going to cover Wisconsin, areas of Minnesota, Michigan, and even portions of like northern Illinois, northern Indiana in this. But then we're going to have a separate one for Missouri and Illinois. Okay, so really, we take it to about midday. A lot of activity moving into the western half of Wisconsin. You're going to have these storms in Iowa. We're going to try not to mention Iowa because we already did, right? A lot of widespread rains up here in central to northern Minnesota. At this point, nothing crazy has happened in northern Illinois yet. And really not even in Wisconsin yet. But then as we start to get into about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you see this line of storms rumbling through south central areas of Wisconsin. I think these will have the opportunity to produce some large hail and some damaging winds, even a tornado threat. I just don't know if that low-level moisture is all the way this far north in Wisconsin quite yet. Kind of a weird shaped warm front boundary throughout this entire region. If you're in that boundary, south of it, then you're going to have the low-level moisture that supports tornadoes. If you're north of it, more so a damaging wind, large hail threat. But that'll change as you work your way deeper into the day. And then as you got to just watch this line of storms as it continues to kind of sweep through central Wisconsin. I think it will lose some steam as you get closer to Green Bay. You get into the UP of Michigan. And then my concern shifts away from this and then back to this energy. So watch what happens. Surface low back here. A nasty line of storms develops, I think. And like I said, we're not going to talk about Iowa, but a nasty line of storms develops in southern Minnesota. Rochester, right into here, Minneapolis into here. It could be right on Minneapolis, points south really, but you're right up against the surface low. So if you look at these line of storms here, there is going to be a ton of rotation in these storms. It's just what is your low-level moist profiles going to be in this area. You're going to have a few hour opportunity where dew points probably spike into the 50s and 60s into southeastern Minnesota. This is going to aid a kind of a few hour period in southeastern Minnesota for tornadoes, no doubt about it. So if you live in southeastern Minnesota, I would say 4, 5, 6, 7 p.m. Look how these storms blast through. It's around 6 p.m. An eruption of storms just ongoing in areas of northwestern Wisconsin. I mean, these storms are packing, a punch, kind of moving through, the Eau Claire region, and just causing a damaging wind threat, an ongoing tornado risk. And this continues. And I know it shows it kind of broken up right here, but this could fully be an intact line of storms. But I'm telling you, I can't reiterate this enough. Not a lot of people are talking about this area, but I'm telling you, watch out southeastern Minnesota. You never bet against the surface low, because sometimes right on the southeast flank of that surface low, that's where you can have the most tornadoes. Okay, so please be careful in that area. And we already know about Iowa and northern Missouri. But as we start to make into 7, 8 p.m., you're basically going to have this line of storms sweeping through the heart of Wisconsin, right through the middle of Wisconsin, all the way down into northern Illinois. You see these storms getting close to Rockford. I mean, already have made their way through Madison around 8 to 9 p.m. And remember, I want to mention this every time, but if you're confused about the time frame, this says 10 p.m. up here, but back it up 1 hour because we're in Central Time. And unfortunately, I cannot change this to Central Time. So 9 p.m., line of storms making its way through Wisconsin, knocking on the doorstep of Milwaukee, Chicago. So if you get all the way to the sun setting tonight in Milwaukee, Chicago, and you're thinking, well, the meteorologist busted the forecast. They don't know what they're talking about. They stink. Just note that the weather doesn't really move in, I don't think, until after the sun sets tonight. A line of storms kind of make their way through. Green Bay shows a pretty nasty line of storms making its way through about 10, 11 p.m. Could be pretty stormy up here in the UP of Michigan, especially the western UP. But I do think these storms do lose some punch as they start to move over Lake Michigan, but they might not lose as much punch as what this particular model run is showing. They could be more intact, but, you know, these storms move through like Chicago, maybe around or just before midnight, and then they kind of make their way through the UP and Michigan throughout the late evening, just after midnight hours. And yeah, we'll see how intact these storms are still when they get into the western sections of lower Michigan, where you do have an enhanced risk. But it really shows these storms falling apart on the latest long-range H triple R model, but that might not be the case. So certainly a more of a complex everywhere look in this area. I hope that makes sense. But certainly the confidence increases once you get into Wisconsin for more of a, and northern Illinois for more of a sweeping line of storms. But Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, yeah, you got to watch out, especially southeastern Minnesota, guys. And you can see it, the updraft Felicity swath. You want to watch these storms into the afternoon in central Wisconsin that do develop, shows a heightened region. The vibrant colors is what we call the updraft Felicity swath. This indicates where there's more rotation in these storms, stronger updrafts, large hail tells us that, definitely tornadoes, things like that. And these continue, and there's that concerning area in southeastern, even into western Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota. There's that concerning area for tornadoes in this area, okay? Just south of Minneapolis, getting into the southeastern portion of the state of Minnesota. And then these continue, and then we just got to watch out for rotation with these storms all the way through tomorrow morning. Shows signs of rotating thunderstorms into Wisconsin, especially all the way a little bit into the UP and Michigan. But we will have tornado warnings in this line of storms, most likely in the state of Wisconsin, with a sweeping line of storms later on this afternoon to this evening. Seems like I said the state of Wisconsin about 517 times in this segment, but don't want anybody to think that I leave Wisconsin out. It's funny the amount of comments I get saying, hey, once again, I don't understand why these guys always leave the state of Missouri out. I can assure you guys, I don't leave hardly any states out, guys. I promise you. But updraft Felicity swath there, damaging wind threat will be something serious. Of course, it increases with the line of storms. But look at that area through Wisconsin, northern Illinois. Oof! Look how much ground these storms are covering in a 1 hour period. 1 hour they're here, 1 hour they're there, 1 hour they're here, 1 hour they're here. That's 4 hours. Look how much mileage these storms cover. That's why you're having these weird gaps. So you see these areas right here in kind of that doled out brown, whitish color. That's winds approaching 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. This line of storms up here in southern sections of the state of Wisconsin and northern Illinois. I mean, and look how these storms blast right through Green Bay. Okay? So, man, damaging winds with this, no doubt about it. When, flooding threat, this will be a concern. I think we'll get 1 to as much as 3 inches of rain throughout, the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Iowa, okay? Not as much rain when you get further south, where you'll just have more of one sweeping line of storms. And speaking of areas further south, let's talk about Illinois. Going to get away from Wisconsin and Indiana. We're going to talk about Indiana a little bit. And Missouri. So this will be a little bit easier to talk about because you'll just have literally one sweeping line of storms. We'll take it, let's go on and just take it all the way to about lunchtime. Nothing going on in Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, right? Then we get into about 3 p.m. Let's go to 4 p.m. See this area of storms in northern Missouri? That's capable of producing all hazards if you live in the northern counties of Missouri, no doubt. But what I want you to watch is what develops here in western and southwestern Missouri. Okay? Bang. I mean, that's 1 hour. That's 4 p.m. That's 5 p.m. And once again, saying, well, Mitch, I see 6 p.m. here. This is in Central Time. Back this up 1 hour because this is in Eastern Time. Okay, but we're in Central Time here, and I cannot change this to Central Time. So it's around 5 p.m. Okay, still nothing going on in Illinois. Thinking, man, where's all this weather they're talking about? It's coming. Okay, and we get into 6 p.m. I could have a broken line of supercells deep down into Missouri, guys. And folks, there's a lot more fuel in the atmosphere the further south you get into Missouri. So nasty storms possible in Arkansas, but we're not going to talk about Arkansas yet. But central Missouri, look at these line of storms making its way through around 6 p.m. I mean, Columbia up to Kirksville. And then this starts to enter like the Hannibal region. And then we start to get into about 8 p.m., getting close to when the sun's setting, right? Line of storms making its way through, eastern Missouri, southern Missouri, knocking on the doorstep of St. Louis. Storms entering western Illinois at this point. And guys, these storms do not look that impressive, but I can tell you this is just model guidance. We don't know exactly the structure of these storms is going to be. What I'm very, very confident in is that we are going to just have a sweeping line of storms. Could be broken up in certain areas, but capable of producing very large hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. Hail threat won't be as significant as it will be further to the west. And I know I didn't mention Kansas City, but there's a shot Kansas City doesn't even get a drop of rain. There's also a chance a storm could develop right on top of you this afternoon. So, most model guides have the storms forming east of Kansas City. But these storms continue. We get into about 10 p.m. Looks like a sloppy line of storms. Once again, I will reiterate this. This line of storms could be more intact in Illinois. But remember I told you last night I thought the moderate risk would get extended more into Illinois? Well, it didn't. And it probably didn't because some model guide shows these storms kind of falling apart. And I think there is a possibility of that in northern Illinois, that these storms kind of dwindle away, they kind of fall apart. But there is also an opportunity for this to be completely wrong. And these storms are a lot more intense on this run of the HRRR model than what they're showing. Shows widespread thunderstorm activity in southern Missouri around St. Louis around 9-10 p.m. And these continue to kind of rumble through the Boot Hill, Missouri, just after midnight, southern sections of Illinois. And then these will try to make it all the way to Evansville, Indiana, western Kentucky, western Tennessee as we get into the wee hours of the morning, where they could still be hitting severe limits. I think they'll lose some steam, though. But, you look at the updraft Felicity swath, folks, in this region, and, they could increase the tornado threat further south into Missouri. You see these rotating updrafts symbolized by the colors. Like I said, this indicates where there's rotation in these particular storms, where you could potentially have a tornado, stronger updraft, larger hail. So I do think the weather's going to be quite active in central and even southwestern Missouri today. So don't ignore that. Seems like a lot of people aren't talking about that. I've had a lot of people say that I skipped Missouri, but not a lot, just a few people. I'm acting like a drama queen here. It's not a lot, but like I said, it's funny the amount of people that say I skip a particular state, but I do not. And I take pride in the fact that I do not. But anyways, don't want to get off track here. But you see up here in northern Illinois, there is a sign of rotating thunderstorms, stronger updrafts, larger hail. And I will tell you, if you look at the significant tornado parameter with this, and you kind of move through in time, it certainly does spike as we are starting to get into later this afternoon to 3s, 4s, and 5s and 6s in central Missouri, all the way down here into Oklahoma and Arkansas, which we'll talk about here in a second. But just because you see the ingredients for tornadoes, that don't necessarily mean you're going to get tornadoes. You actually have to have thunderstorms. But in this case, in Missouri, you do get thunderstorms. It taps into the ingredients driving this higher insignificant tornado parameter in Missouri. And then it does show some, higher numbers in Illinois. Not quite as high, though. But you just want to watch out for these storms, for sure. And then the predicted wind gust swaths from this, I think this is mainly a bigger deal for areas in northern Missouri and Illinois. You see where any storms are going to be. You get pockets of 50, 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts. Well, you don't really see any 70s, but certainly 50 to 60 in these little darker reds, almost brownish colors. Look here in the extreme northwestern Illinois, where you do have, gust of winds possible, 70 to 80 miles per hour. I'll tell you, the HRRR model isn't always the best with this, but it does give us an idea, and it does reflect what we're seeing per the Storm Prediction Center as far as damaging winds. So very strong winds associated with this, no doubt about it. And then we'll talk about Oklahoma and Texas. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we'll take it all the way to this afternoon. One thing I want to note for Oklahoma and Texas, there is a shot for more widespread thunderstorms than what the HRRR model is showing. But as of now, it doesn't show a lot of oomph in the atmosphere to get these storms going. It has been consistent on showing a storm just west of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, some storms in northwestern sections of northeastern sections of Oklahoma, and then some storms in northwestern Arkansas. I do think will develop and pack a punch here. Has a chance to produce, some large hail, gusty winds, even an isolated tornado. So you do want to watch these storms in Oklahoma, North Texas, Arkansas. They will have the capability. Look at this sail rumbling right through the Dallas-Fort Worth area, around later this evening. Okay, so it's very possible, just not a high possibility. Okay, but one more time, you kind of look at the ingredients here. One thing we know, there's a ton of moisture in the atmosphere. Okay, these are dew points. You're going to get a pool of rich moisture, pretty much surging all the way up into Minnesota. Okay, dew points in the 60s and 70s. Afternoon, check this off the box. No point staying that long on this. Thermodynamics, as far as dew points, go on and give it a firm checking. Okay, plenty of moist air, dew points in the 60s and 70s. If you don't know what that means, that's very humid air. Okay, warm, moist air for these updrafts to basically ingest. In response to those higher dew points, you also have higher CAPE levels. And look how they spike just after lunchtime, right along this line. You see these weird little bubbles? These are these thunderstorms feeding off the CAPE in the atmosphere, okay, which is storm fuel. Anything over 1,000 joules per kilogram is plenty of storm energy in the atmosphere. And this goes well over 2,500, almost 3,000 in areas. Plenty of energy in the atmosphere for these storms to fuel off of. And you notice we get late into this afternoon. Look how you get this pocket of CAPE approaching well over 2,000 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE in southeastern Minnesota. That's where we're going to have the concern for those tornadoes as energy really rises very briefly into this area. Okay? And then the last thing we'll look at is kinematics, folks. High-end kinematic atmosphere as surface low is right here. If you look closely, you'll see the wind barbs kind of circling around. That is where our surface low is. Anything south, southeast of this surface low, you're going to have a rampant low-level jet into this region. And sure enough, we start to get into later this afternoon, low-level jet approaching over 50 to 60 knots. It means winds about a mile above our heads, where we're standing in Iowa here, is like approaching interstate speed, guys. So what does that tell us? In this entire region, all the way up in here into Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, there's a ton of wind energy in the atmosphere to fuel this damaging wind threat and this tornado threat. Tons of it, guys. And this continues all the way into the late evening hours. And this really just fuels, kinematic-wise, this damaging line of storms that'll sweep through areas of the upper Midwest. 41 minutes through, that's it with the severe weather breakdown. Let's talk about everybody else. The southeast, quiet day of weather. Okay, we're going to have some isolated pop-up showers and storms, especially for southern Florida. Watch out for those. Isolated shower downpour is possible in western North Carolina, all the way up the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. Very isolated, not a big deal, as you can tell. Look at those pop-ups down in Florida. But outside of that, not a whole lot going on. Leftover energy will kind of fizzle into Tennessee and Kentucky as we're getting into tomorrow morning, bringing us some showers, maybe some storms we're waking up to from central Kentucky, Tennessee points west. All right, northeast today, energy to your north up in Canada will promote an atmosphere enough lift for strong to severe storms in Vermont, the Adirondacks of New York. Okay, these could develop as far, back west as the northern Finger Lakes region, Tuckhill Plateau, but definitely widespread storms in areas of northeastern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. A lot of storm action in this area. And this will try to drift into Maine. These storms will try to drift as far south as southern Vermont, New Hampshire, maybe into western Mass as we get into this evening. These will have the capability of producing some small hail and some gusty winds. Who knows, maybe an isolated tornado. Definitely enough surface heating to fuel those storms up here in this region today. Everybody else, pretty quiet weather, getting pretty warm too. South central U.S., we pretty much already covered this area, but I'll take a broad look at this again. Some showers will kind of move out of Colorado into western Kansas. More stable conditions will prevent any severe weather. But you got to watch an individual storm or two deep down in Texas, including around the Dallas-Fort Worth area where there is a slight risk, guys. So you can't completely ignore our friends here in Texas, Oklahoma, where there is a risk of a more, I would say, a conditional risk of a supercell or two. Okay? And then we look up here to the north central U.S. We know there's a lot of action up here. Surface low, there it is right here showing up off this particular map. A lot of rain getting slung back into the eastern Dakotas. Just more stable conditions, just more widespread, moderate to heavy rain. And we've already talked about this severe weather scenario that you see here. But we are just gonna have more widespread, stable rain up here in northern Minnesota, just a washout of a day. Severe weather will not be a big story up here. When we get into the overnight hours, all that action will continue to move into the Great Lakes region. We'll continue just to deal with a lot of rain in northern Minnesota as this low really kind of combines with an upper low and just turns into a big storm system, very strong system, almost a sub 980 millibar low up here. So western U.S., not a whole lot to talk about besides some snow in the higher elevations of Wyoming and Colorado, maybe Montana also, but some widespread rains across Washington, northern Oregon, and then they'll kind of drift down into northern Idaho, western Montana, and we get all the way to tomorrow morning, and we'll just have another round of activity, energy in the atmosphere for western Montana, Idaho. But the southwestern U.S. is pretty quiet. And once again, nothing really to speak on. Temperatures today, very warm Very warm all the way up here into the northeast. 70s and 80s. A little bit still of an onshore flow will keep the immediate coastal regions cool, but you go about 30 minutes inland, it warms up dramatically, and just warm temperatures across all the south, the eastern U.S., the Ohio Valley, 70s, 80s, even some 90s up here into the Midwestern states ahead of an atmosphere beginning to get primed for severe weather. Western U.S., much cooler for the central and northern Rockies, even areas of the southern Rockies. Southwestern U.S., still hanging on to that warm air, but not quite as hot, but just lower pressure overhead, a lot of energy, cloud cover will keep your temperatures pretty cool. Okay. Tomorrow, I just don't have the time to break this down. I'll try to do it tonight. There is an enhanced risk now in the southern sections of this. Level 3 out of 5 for areas of southern Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Level 3 out of 5 now. This is driven off a tornado threat, but more so driven off a damaging wind threat and a large hail threat. Slight risk doesn't go all the way into the western sections of New York State. I know people want me to talk about this probably, but I just don't have the time to do it. Probably about to be late for work as it is, but there is a chance of a lot of severe weather for tomorrow also. And then there's a chance for severe weather for Thursday. Okay, this will probably upgrade to an enhanced risk also. And then, guys, the new news here is predictability too low. There'll probably be a severe weather risk for Friday. But really, the new information, Saturday, slight risk up already for day 5. Level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather for Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas. We're going to do it all over again. And then check this out. Day 6 for Sunday. This is pretty far out. 15% risk of severe weather right over sections in the Mid-South, Mid-Mississippi Valley, areas of the Midwest. Active, extremely active weather is going to continue for the foreseeable future, guys. God bless all y'all. Stay safe today, and I'll talk to you again soon.